They don't miss you. They miss controlling you. Thomas Erikson, they don't miss you. They miss having power over your mind. There's a silence that doesn't bring peace. A message that doesn't mean love. A return that isn't about you, but about control. And if you're watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They disappeared, ghosted you, discarded you, maybe even replaced you, and then suddenly, they come back. With softness, with nostalgia, with false regret. But this isn't love. This is the reactivation of control. Today, we will expose what that return really means and why. The narcissist's silence is never truly silent. Stay with me until the end. Because once you understand this, you will never look back again. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't give closure. They vanished like a shadow, expecting you to collapse in confusion. And for a while, you did. You questioned yourself. You rewrote every memory, trying to understand what you did wrong. You romanticized their silence, thinking maybe they needed space. You assumed the pain meant something real had existed between you. But what if I told you their silence was the ultimate form of domination? Narcissists don't exit. They hover. They observe. They wait for the perfect moment to react. Not when you're strong, but when you start rebuilding. When your smile returns. When you begin to forget them, that's when they strike. They don't come back because they miss you. They come back because they miss your compliance, your confusion, your vulnerability, your willingness to explain yourself again and again, just to feel understood. It was never about connection. It was about submission. They don't miss your voice. They miss the silence you accepted after their punishments. They don't miss your presence. They miss the power they felt when you begged to be seen. This is not a love story. This is a power dynamic. And it's time you break it. They show up with softness. A text at midnight? Hey, I was just thinking about you. And something inside you wants to believe that maybe they've changed, that maybe they did miss you, that the pain meant something. But remember this, they always return when they sense you slipping, out of reach. Not when they love you, but when they fear losing control. They don't come back to rebuild. They come back to reset your obedience, to reopen the wound, to remind you who held the knife. And if you let them in again, the cycle restarts, quieter, colder, deadlier. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It's how addiction forms. Moments of pleasure followed by long stretches of silence, absence, rejection, then, a sudden act of affection, a crumb of attention, and your nervous system lights up, like a prisoner fed after days of hunger. This is not love. This is trauma bonding. It's chemical, neurological, strategic, and they know it. Because each time you respond, you teach them you're still theirs. They want you to believe it was all your fault, that you were too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. So when they come back, they don't apologize. They hint, they gaslight. They minimize what they did and amplify what you lacked. And maybe you even start apologizing for your own pain, for reacting to their absence, for not handling it better. But let me tell you the truth. You were never too much. You were just too awake for someone committed to emotional sleep. When they say I miss you, listen carefully. What part of you do they miss? The one who stayed silent while being blamed. The one who justified the distance. The one who broke themselves into pieces just to keep the connection. They don't miss your soul. They miss your submission. They miss the old version of you, the one that still believed it was love. But now you're changing. You're waking up, and they can feel it. That's why they're back. Not to reconnect, but to reclaim. They watched you survive what was meant to destroy you. They thought you'd break. You didn't. You stood up, slowly, quietly, painfully. But you stood, and in that strength you became unfamiliar to them. They don't recognize the version of you that no longer needs them. So they return, not because they care, but because they're losing access to the version of you they could control. The narcissist never lets go. They let you believe you escaped, but they keep the door open. The silence isn't disconnection, it's preparation, it's observation. They are studying you, waiting for vulnerability, for loneliness, for weakness, and when they sense it, they reappear, not as an abuser, but as a savior, as the only one who ever really understood you. It's bait, and you've seen the trap before. Don't walk into it again. They don't ask how you've healed. They don't ask what you've learned. They don't ask who you've become, because they don't care. What they care about is one thing. Can they still control how you feel? Can they still make your heart race, your stomach turn, your mind spiral? That's the metric they measure, not your value, not your soul, your accessibility. If you're still reachable through guilt, through longing, through silence, they know. They still own part of you. That's why they never give full closure, because closure would mean release, and release would mean losing the puppet, losing the mirror, losing the control. And a narcissist would rather keep a broken version of you on standby than let you become whole without them. You might wonder, why do they come back right when you've begun to feel peace? Because peace is power. And your peace, your quiet healing, your reclaimed self-worth, is a threat to their illusion. They can't stand the idea that you've moved on, not because they love you, but because your detachment invalidates their fantasy. To the narcissist, you were never a partner. You were a supply, a source of emotional fuel. Attention, affection, confusion, admiration, they feed on it all. And when that supply runs dry, they panic. Not for you, for their own emptiness. That's why they recycle you. That's why they always leave a crack in the door. That's why the message always comes right before your breakthrough. Because deep down, they know you're close to waking up, close to naming what they are, close to burning the script. And so they try one last time, with softness, with suggestion, with unfinished sentences designed to hook you emotionally. Don't fall for it. Their message is not a confession. It's a test. They are testing the depth of your healing. They want to know, are you still available to be manipulated? Are you still hoping for a version of them that never existed? Are you still confused enough to believe silence means growth? Let me be clear, silence is not healing if it's used to punish. Growth is not real if it's only timed to manipulate. And love, real love, never comes with fear, as a precondition. So when they reach out, pause. Don't respond from longing, respond from clarity. Remember who they were when you needed them most. Remember how they vanished when your soul was breaking. Remember the silence, not as mystery, but as violence. Emotional abandonment is not romantic. It is not spiritual. It is not deep. It is neglect. It is cruelty. It is power disguised as distance. And the one who uses silence to confuse you does not love you. They fear your awakening. And now here you are awake. Maybe trembling, maybe alone, but aware. And that awareness is everything. It's the key to the cage, the crack in the illusion, the beginning of your freedom. Don't trade it for a memory. Don't trade it for a maybe. Don't trade it for the return of the very person who taught you to doubt yourself. Because they don't miss you. They miss owning the version of you that hadn't yet learned to say no. They miss the emotional access, the open door, the sleepless nights they caused but never stayed to witness, the guilt they implanted but never helped you heal. That's what they miss. Not your soul, not your growth, not your healing. They miss control. They miss compliance. They miss your silence. But you're not silent anymore. You're not frozen. You're not small. You are seeing it clearly now. The pattern, the cycle, the wound. You are waking up to a truth they never wanted you to hold. And the most dangerous thing a person can do to a manipulator is heal without their permission. So keep healing loudly, quietly, fully, without apology. Because that, more than anything else, is how you win. You don't owe them a response. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them another chance to enter your mind disguised as redemption. Because their return is not built on accountability, it's built on calculation, on timing, on the assumption that you still need their validation to feel worthy, that you'll still pick up the pieces they shattered just to feel close to them again. But this time is different, because you've stopped asking what you did wrong, and started asking why you tolerated it for so long. That question changes everything. It shifts the focus from their manipulation to your awakening, and that is terrifying, not to you, but to them. Because once you stop trying to be lovable in someone else's story, you begin to write your own. You begin to feel the rage that turns into boundaries, the grief that transforms into wisdom, the silence that becomes self-respect. And once you feel that, once you see that, you can never unsee it. You start to recognize their return, not as fate, but as a trap, not as hope, but as history repeating itself. And you, finally, have the courage to interrupt the pattern. You remember how the last time they left, you blamed yourself. You analyzed every word, every reaction, every moment, hoping to decode what made them stop loving you. But here's the truth. They didn't stop loving you, because they never started, not truly, not as you are. What they loved was the version of you who stayed small, who kept doubting, who kept explaining, who kept hoping. And when you grew beyond that version, when you began to see through the performance, the illusion broke, and with it, their ability to control you. They say they miss you, but they don't ask how you're really doing. They say they remember the good times, but they don't mention the sleepless nights you spent crying over their absence. They say they were confused, but they never acknowledge the chaos they left behind. And when you bring it up, the hurt, the manipulation, the abandonment, they call you dramatic. They say it wasn't that serious, that you're overreacting, that you're too sensitive. But that's not true. You're not too sensitive. You were simply too available to someone emotionally absent. And now, you're not. Now you see that love doesn't come back just to test if it still hurts. Love doesn't vanish without warning and return without remorse. Love doesn't confuse presence with power or silence with strategy. Love doesn't make you doubt your worth, question your reality, or feel like you're walking on emotional landmines. Love makes you feel safe, heard, real, and what they offered you, that wasn't love. It was possession wearing the mask of passion. So when they come back, and they will, ask yourself, what are they really offering? Is it change, or is it convenience? Are they speaking from reflection, or from the fear of losing access to you? Because there's a difference. Real change comes with responsibility, not charm. With acknowledgement, not avoidance. With humility, not seduction. If they can't name what they did, if they can't sit in the discomfort of your pain without defending themselves, they haven't changed, they've rehearsed. And here's the most dangerous part. They will sound believable. They will say the right things. Their tone will be softer, their words more thoughtful. They might even cry. But listen closely. Are they trying? To understand your pain or trying to erase it? Are they validating your experience or rewriting the story to cast themselves in a softer light? You'll feel the difference in your body. One brings peace, the other tightens your chest. One feels like relief, the other feels like walking back into a familiar prison, but with nicer curtains. Your nervous system knows the truth. Listen to it. That ache in your stomach when you read their name? That hesitation in your breath when you see their message? That's not nostalgia, that's memory. That's trauma memory. And it's not asking to be reopened, it's asking to be respected. Your growth is not a stage for their redemption arc. You are not a prop in their second chance performance. You are a person, healing, breathing, becoming, and you do not exist to make their absence comfortable. They want you to believe you're cold, that you're unforgiving, that you're holding a grudge. But the truth is, you're holding the line between who you were when they broke you and who you are now that you've rebuilt. And that line is sacred. It was drawn with tears, and time, and terrifying solitude. Don't let them step over it because they remembered your name when their loneliness got louder than their pride. They don't miss you. They miss the role you played in their life. The role of listener, apologizer, peacemaker, mirror. They miss the version of you who made their emotional chaos feel justified, who normalized their inconsistency, who called manipulation a misunderstanding. That version of you was a lifeline to their dysfunction, but you're not that version anymore. You've grieved them. You've outgrown the chaos. And that growth, that sacred transformation, is not up for negotiation. They don't admire your growth. They fear it. Because growth creates distance, not just physical, but energetic. They feel it. The way your silence has changed, it no longer pleads. It protects. The way your boundaries now feel like stone, not sand. You're no longer emotionally accessible. And that makes you dangerous to them, because it means their influence is fading. And that's the one thing they cannot tolerate, the loss of control. That's why they come back, not because they love you, but because they feel you slipping into your own power. They call it a second chance, a reconnection, a sign. But what it really is panic. Panic that they are no longer the center of your emotional world. Panic that their name no longer controls your heartbeat. Panic that someone else might be holding the space they used to waste. And most of all, panic that you are learning how to love yourself in a way they never could. You see, people like this don't just fear being forgotten, they fear being irrelevant. Because without your attention, they are left with themselves. And there is no greater punishment for someone who built their identity around control than to sit alone with their own emptiness. They study your patterns. They remember what worked. The songs you liked, the tone that softened you, the words that disarmed your boundaries. They remember it all, and they use it, but not with love, with strategy. They don't come back for reconciliation. They come back for re-entry, for access, for another chance to feed on your hope. And if you're not grounded in your worth, if you haven't mourned the fantasy they sold you, you might open the door. And the moment you do, the cycle begins again. Softer at first, but still the same trap. They'll speak of healing, but won't take responsibility. They'll ask for forgiveness, but not offer change. They'll paint the future, but avoid the past. It's not love, it's marketing. Emotional branding to sell you the illusion that this time will be different, but it won't be, because it's not new. It's recycled, and you've outgrown repetition disguised as redemption. You've stopped mistaking familiarity for fate. You've stopped mistaking intensity for intimacy. You've learned to sit with your loneliness rather than run back to your captor. Learned that missing someone is not a reason to return to them. That silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes, it's protection. Sometimes, it's healing. Sometimes, it's you choosing your peace over their chaos. And that choice, that sacred, terrifying choice, is what breaks the cycle. But make no mistake, they will not let go easily. Not because of love, but because control doesn't surrender. It negotiates. It rebrands. And the more aware you become, the more subtle the manipulation will be. It won't always be cruel. Sometimes it will sound kind, gentle, spiritual. But listen with your body, not just your ears. Your nervous system remembers what your mind tries to romanticize. And if it feels like shrinking, if it feels like walking backwards into a version of yourself you've worked so hard to outgrow, it's not healing. It's regression. And you deserve more than being reduced to the role they miss. You deserve more than being used as a mirror for someone who refuses to see themselves. You are not a second chance. You are not a placeholder. You are not the soft place they return to when the world no longer applauds their performance. You are becoming, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly, and that journey, that holy becoming, is not a stage for their redemption arc. You don't owe them front row seats to the version of you they never believed in. Let them miss you. Let them sit with the echo of your absence. Let them wonder who you've become. But don't you dare return to the person you had to unbecome just to survive them. You're not heartless. You're healing. You're not cruel. You're clear. And clarity will always look like cruelty to those who benefited from your confusion. Let them call you cold. Let them say you've changed. That's the point. You have. You've stopped begging to be understood. You've stopped over-explaining your boundaries. You've stopped mistaking pain for proof of love. And that shift, that irreversible shift, is the beginning of freedom. They don't miss you. They miss the access they lost. the control they once had, the power they abused. And that is not your burden to carry anymore. You don't have to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not to anyone. You don't have to show how much you've grown. You don't have to explain why you left. You don't need to justify your silence. Healing is not about performance. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away in exchange for crumbs of love. It's about no longer needing to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. And that is the freedom they never wanted you to taste. Because once you know your worth, you stop negotiating it. Once you know your truth, you stop apologizing for it. And once you find your peace, you stop chasing chaos and calling it passion. You don't need closure from the person who broke you. Their silence was your answer. Their absence was your clarity. Their return is not your redemption. It is a test. And this time, you pass by walking away. You are not a victim anymore. You are a survivor. You are not someone they lost. You are someone they never truly deserved. And every step you take away from that cycle is a step back into your own wholeness. You were never too much. You were just never meant to fit inside their small, controlled version of love. And now, you're free. So when they reach out again, as they always do, remember this. You are not cold. You are healed. You are not cruel. You are clear. You are not bitter. You are awake. And that awakening, that deep, quiet, irreversible awakening, is the one thing they cannot unsee, unfeel, or undo. They don't miss you. They miss controlling you. And now, finally, they can't. If this message spoke to a part of you that still aches for answers, still waits for peace, still wonders if it was love, let this be your clarity. Share this with someone who needs to remember why they walked away. Like this video if it mirrored something you couldn't put into words. And subscribe, not just for content, but for the reminder, you're not alone in your awakening, you're not broken, you're just finally free.